A Slurpee summit in the future?
I don't know about a Slurpee. How about a glass of Merlot?
What is your drink of choice at the end of this very long election weekend?
I think Democrats and Republicans, everybody could use a nice glass of Merlot. Top line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC's Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
I'm Karen Travers.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here with the latest in politics, everything you need to know. Twitter.com/Rick Klein, Twitter.com/Karen Travers. It is only water in my Top Line mug. No Slurpees, no Merlot. We still have another workday to get through after a very busy week in politics.
It is only noon.
It is only
We'll
noon.
give it a couple hours.
Indeed.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, though, as they say.
All right. What do you know today, Karen?
Pelosi's ponderings. ABC News' John Carl reported yesterday that Speaker Pelosi is considering some options to possibly stay on in Congress. And she went a little bit further with the Huffington Post, and she says, I've gotten a positive response to the idea of her possibly running for minority leader.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. I think most people in the last couple of days thought this is it for Nancy Pelosi. She's made her mark on the history books. She now moves on, but now she might be staying.
An unusual move. It's been about 50 years since a former House Speaker became minority leader. Maybe we're in one of those periods in politics where there's enough wackiness out there that it's possible, although there are several Democrats who are saying publicly she should not run for minority leader. And that possibility raises the prospect of a divisive leadership fight. That's what Democrats want to avoid. Hopefully, according to Democrats, they'll have a decision from Nancy Pelosi by early next week. Next up today, 53. That is the final number of Senate Democrats as we have the results in Washington State. Patty Murray hanging on for an additional term. And I'll tell you, Karen, 53 is 6 losses for Democrats. Not a great year, but if you asked them a month ago, 2 months ago, would you take 53 Democratic senators? Every one of them takes that.
Absolutely. This could have been much worse, though we're already starting to talk about 2012, and the forecast doesn't look much better for them in 2012. They really need to figure out how they're going to regroup and protect some of the vulnerable members. And you have to wonder what members get challenges now, what people out there are looking and saying, hey, we could possibly challenge a moderate Democrat. Look what the Tea Party was able to do this year. Christine's new adventures. Christine O'Donnell may have lost that Delaware Senate race, but she is not going anywhere. Let's take a listen.
A lot of good did come out of my candidacy. I honestly have no clue. I'm looking at the short term. We have a lot of opportunities from book deals, that I'm exploring.
I'm really looking forward to a TLC reality show exploring Delaware, similar to the Alaska one that Sarah Palin's doing. It'd be great.
In Dover with Christine O'Donnell. And I love this. This is a great Delaware tradition, but Christine O'Donnell and Chris Coons out there yesterday literally burying the hatchet. A great moment, a nice moment after an ugly campaign. And finally today, grisly expressions. Sometimes the picture tells it all. And take a look after Diane Sawyer showed John Boehner that Sarah Palin video. Take a look at this.
What do you think?
Well, how about that? John Boehner is, of course, Sarah Palin won't be a member of the caucus, but a lot of House members who draw some inspiration from the kind of message we saw right now are going to be people that John Boehner has to manage. That's not going to be easy.
No, and that did not look like somebody who was necessarily looking forward to managing that. A little bit of bemusement on his face.
I would think that. We begin today's program up on Capitol Hill. Senator Byron Dorgan, a Democrat of North Dakota who's retiring at the end of this term, joins us. Thank you, Senator, for being here. And I want to start. It was such a rough night for so many Democrats, including in your own home state of North Dakota. Your Senate seat went to a Republican. The House seat, Earl Pomeroy, lost his re-election bid. Do you think you could have won in this environment?
Oh, I don't know. I've done 30 years here in the U.S. Congress, and I just felt for me that I didn't want to commit to another 7 years, this year plus 6 more. So it would have been interesting to try. I've been very successful. I've run 12 times statewide. But it was a big night for Republicans. But I should hasten to say, I don't think the American people think either political party is much of a bargain these days. And I think at the moment, boy, they're going to focus on Washington to say, what are you all doing to get together around the same table and see if you can get the best ideas that both political parties have for a change and offer them for the country's benefit.
Given that, Senator Dorgan, is there anything that Earl Pomeroy, Stephanie Herseth Sandlin could have done, a message they could have had for the voters in North and South Dakota that might have made their race go their way?
I think this was a pretty big tide, and I don't know that there was a specific message from it except that people want change. This economy has been in critical condition and is improving now, but we've got 20 million people who woke up this morning, most of them out of work, some of them working at jobs much less than they could do. And I think going forward, the entire issue is jobs. And I think our caucus, and I think the Republican caucus would be well advised to understand a good job is more important than any social program, because it makes everything else possible, and we need to focus like a laser on that. And if I can just mention one additional point, how do you do that? Well, it's like filling up a bathtub. You know, you got a faucet. You want to put more jobs in by creating more jobs, and you want to shut the drain. I mean, stop giving tax breaks for moving jobs overseas. Both approaches ought to be used, and that is to say to companies that stay here and produce products here that say made in America, to say, look, we want to reward you. We want to provide incentives to keep you here. Let's say good for you, and shut off the incentives that are moving jobs overseas. We need to work on all of those issues.
Senator, as you know, Democrats did a lot on jobs, and there was a focus from the White House. They did the stimulus bill. Obviously, there were a number of small business tax cuts and other things. It wasn't that people weren't looking at jobs, but was there not enough done, or were there some mistakes in where the focus was? Was it the fact that you got sidetracked on other issues that weren't related to jobs, like health care?
Well, let's remember that the day Barack Obama took office and walked across the threshold of the White House, there were 700,000 people that lost their jobs that month, 1 month. So what did happen is we averted a complete collapse of the economy, but it is still the case that despite the fact that we had economic recovery funds and all the other things going on, it is still the fact that a lot of people woke up this morning that had lost their jobs. Some have lost their homes. A lot of people have lost hope. And so Washington has not done enough to incentivize the things necessary to help create jobs out in the private sector.
Senator, today the jobs report had 159,000 jobs added. This is the 4th straight month of private sector job gain. If this had happened a couple months ago, could that tide have been turned for Democrats? Is this too little, too late to help the Democrats?
I don't know the answer to that, and this is a good report. It's still slow. We need to ratchet this way up. Just in terms of population increase, you need a lot of new jobs every month to take care of that. But I talked to Secretary Geithner yesterday by telephone about some other things, and we talked about the economy and where it's headed, and I think he believes that we're not going to have a second dip here. And now the question is, as we begin to see these jobs created in the private sector, how rapidly can we get people back to payrolls? Because this is all about confidence. If people are confident about their future, about their job, they do things that manifest that: buy a trip, buy a house, buy some clothes, buy a car, and that's expansive to the economy. But at the moment, I think this election demonstrates again, people have been through a very difficult time, and they're not very confident about the future yet. So I know the president understands that, and I hope both parties in Congress can work together to not only understand it, but to do something about it.
Senator, of course, your term ends at the end of the year, but there's a critical piece of legislation that Congress will take up before then in the lame duck session,
right,
and that has to do with the Bush-era tax cuts. We heard the president earlier this week seem to give a little bit of ground. We saw Speaker-to-be Boehner yesterday in the interview with ABC talk about how he's committed to having these extended across the board. Where's the middle ground here? What do you think ultimately happens? Do we see maybe a temporary extension of all the tax cuts for a year or 2 years, and then talk about the more than 250,000 after that?
I think that probably will end up being the case, and that it has to be done by the end of December. We're going to have a lame duck session in December. My own view is that we have a $13 trillion debt. We have a $1.3 trillion annual budget deficit at the moment. It's coming down, but it's huge. And I'd like to err on the side of being conservative and cautious here. I would propose that we extend for 2 years the middle income tax cuts up to $250,000 and leave it at that. I don't think that's what is going to happen. I think there's going to be a compromise, and perhaps, as you suggested, the most likely compromise, I suppose, would be to extend all tax cuts for a couple of years. But the fact is, we've got to keep our eye on this debt. We've got people going to war in the mornings. We're fighting 2 wars, and certainly now the one in Afghanistan, and we haven't paid for a penny of it for 9 years. If you're going to send kids to go in harm's way and strap on body armor in the morning, get shot at in the afternoon, how about asking the country to pay the taxes to support that? We need to have the courage to do that.
Senator, I want to ask you about the comments that Mitch McConnell made yesterday, not backing down from that pledge to make President Obama a one-term president. Everybody's talking now about cooperation and bipartisan collaboration. What's your forecast for that actually happening? What do you expect your Democratic colleagues in the Senate to do in the next 2 years? That
one comment by Senator McConnell demonstrates more than almost anything I know how how dysfunctional this place has become. If that, in fact, is his top priority as the minority leader of the Senate, then he's missing about what's happening in this country. The top priority ought to be to say, you know what, a lot of people are suffering. Not just politicians lost their jobs. The fact is about 9 million people have had to go home and say they've lost their jobs in recent years. I think it's important for Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid and the President and everybody else to decide we're going to find a big old table. We're all going to sit around that table and try to gather the best of the ideas and cooperate and work together.
All right, Senator Byron Dorgan, Democrat of North Dakota, one of the true gentlemen of the Senate, retiring at the end of the year. We're going to miss you in Washington. We appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks a lot. Good to be with you.